And I think, yes. Bingo. Hello, friendies. How are you all? It is good to see you. I'm Tad. It is about 7 o'clock. Well, now a minute past. And I'm going to read in just a little while. But first, I thought I'd say hello and check in with y'all. I don't have a huge amount to say, as I told everybody last night. Just in the midst of lots of work and things. Had been compiling all of the proof corrections for Into the Narrow Dark, and have finished that, but now have to write up the acknowledgments, et cetera, et cetera. So if anybody knows anybody that should be in acknowledgments that I've forgotten, please feel free to tell me. And that kind of stuff, and polish up the synopsis, because of course with these complicated books I always try to put a synopsis in, to let people have at least a chance that if they start reading and say, I don't remember any of this, they can go back and flick through the synopsis and be reminded, because yes, they are very complicated stories. I'm sure that there's a better way of doing it than what I'm doing. Uh, in terms of writing such complex, complicated stories that only a small coterie of people truly like, because there just aren't that many masochists out in the world who like extra super long books with super complicated plots and lots of different characters and all that. But I'm glad for them, and I'm doing what I can. So anything else that needs to be mentioned? I trying to think about it. We just had a kind of a normal week. We finally did my birthday dinner with the family, which was fun, with just the kids and Deb and I. Had to leave the poor dogs behind, which is always which is always a strain, because the dogs, especially Big Dog Johnny, they hate it when we go out. They've gotten so spoiled during the pandemic. They hated it before anyway. I used to try and give them like a biscuit or something as a treat to get them into the bedroom when we went out, because we leave them in one of the rooms. And this little dog would always take them, or both little dogs at the time would always take the treats quite happily, but Johnny would just stare at me, and if I held it in front of his mouth, he'd just kind of sniff it and give me this look like, you think you can buy me off with a rotten little biscuit. And now I've given up. I don't even give them treats anymore, because I know Johnny won't eat them because he's too sad. So instead he just looks at me with these big dog eyes. Okay, you hate us. You're deserting us. It's just tragic. Anyway, so we actually went out without the dogs, tragically, but still we had a good time. Somehow we managed to have a good time even without the dogs. I don't tell them. And that was nice. And other than that, not a lot to report. Just lots of work to do. Some interesting things going on in the background, but nothing at this point that I have a rule. I call it the Taxman rule. There's in the Beatles song Taxman, which was enacted at a time, or was written at a time, when the UK had put in a 95% top tier income tax, which means, yeah, literally 95% of what you made went to tax. And which is one of the reasons so many rock and roll stars moved to places like France or to the United States or whatever during the 70s. But anyway, there's the line in the song is, there's one for you, 19 for me. Now, this is not a money thing for me when I say that, I call this the taxman situation, or the taxman syndrome. What I'm talking about, the fact is that for every 20 times that you get contacted by something that might turn out to be an interesting gig of some kind, or turn into some more money or some more exposure or whatever, it's like 1 in 20 of those things that actually becomes anything. But the problem is, that's not the problem. The problem, as with everything in the world, is not knowing which ones are the real ones, or are going to turn into something, and which ones don't. And as a result, to do them properly, you have to throw yourself into all 20 things with equal effort. And people want this, or they want that, or they're interested in that, and they want meetings about this and all that. And knowing full well in advance that there's a very small chance that any of them are ever going to actually turn out to be anything. So there's a few things like that going on at this time, but there's nothing worth talking about. If anybody actually hands me money and puts my, and I put my signature on something, then I will share the news. I will share the joy because any money coming in always causes joy in our household. Because contrary to what everybody thinks, being a fairly well-known writer is not the same as being a rich writer. It's not even close. There are a few rich writers out there. There's Stephen King and J.K. Rowling and James Patterson and a few others. But the rest of us, even those of us who've been fortunate enough to make a living, we're making a living. I mean, I have a house. I have a place to live, and I can put food on the table. But beyond that, it's always it's real life. It's real life, like what everybody deals with. Sorry, I wish I could, tell you that, like, hey, if you just get a book published, you're going to be on easy street. You're going to be driving one of them badass Lambos, and you're going to be living at the beach with Hollywood stars. No, doesn't work that way. But that's all right. I don't want that. I wouldn't want that. One of the reasons that I sort of backed out of the idea of, because there was a point in time where I thought I might try to do film writing. And I went down and did a tour of the Southern California studios. My then agency was an agency that's very big in the film business. And and it was interesting. It was a really interesting experience to go to all these different studios and have them sort of kind of not know who you were, but know that your agency, who they worked with a lot, was sort of saying, hey, meet this guy. He's full of ideas, or whatever the case might be. I wasn't privy to those conversations. And, but I also realized that really the only way to do this, unless you're really lucky and you get something made of something you've written, in which case you have that in, although even that doesn't necessarily turn into anything. But other than that, the only way to do it is really just to move down there, take countless meetings, go through that whole taxman syndrome, 20 meetings for every one that sort of might turn into something. And I realized, I've got one of the best day jobs in the world. I don't really want to have to give that up or curtail it drastically, somewhere where I know my work is going to get to people, in the form of books. I don't really want to curtail that and become somebody chasing script deals around Southern California, now, which is not a criticism. I have friends who are film writers, and, it's definitely not a criticism of them. And what they chose to do. And in fact, if anything, it's admiration. But I did realize that, that's just not what I want to do. I'm not, anybody knows me knows I'm not shy. I'm not bashful. I can go out and, mix with people and do all that stuff and schmooze. I can schmooze with the best of them. But I did realize that, do I really want to spend the rest of my working life with a huge percentage of the time being schmoozeful, full of schmoozing? And no, I'd rather save that energy to talk to friends, honestly, instead of talking to people I don't know, but pretending that we're all friends or whatever. And that, again, I'm not saying that the film business is not any phonier than any other arts business, and not a criticism of the film business. It's just that I already had made my way into one business, and I realized I'd have to not just start over again, but then really put a huge amount of full-time work into trying to sell screenplay ideas or get screenplay assignments. And, at that point, I think Deb and I had young kids. I think we had at least Connor, and possibly, I think we'd also had Devin as well, our two biological kids. And I just realized I don't really want to do that. I don't want to move to Los Angeles. I've got nothing against LA particularly, except for the Dodgers. But little baseball joke. But I didn't really want to uproot the family and turn into somebody who had to go out to meetings every day, when in fact what I do now is I stay home and write things every day, or most days. So anyway, that was my brief flirtation. But the best thing, I have to tell you, there was this one, not best, but one amusing thing. I had written as kind of a sample script. Somebody said, "Oh, write a sample script," and this was long before the, Universal Studios Dark Universe experiment and all that. And there was kind of a lull in monster movies. So I wrote a script, a werewolf script called, if I remember correctly, Blood Moon Silver, because the main character's last name was Silver. And that was their last name. Anyway, and so that was what they sent out as a spec script, just to say, here, this is him writing a script, and plus he writes these books and et cetera, et cetera. Anyway, so I was in this one particular studio, and a very nice young woman who clearly didn't know diddly about me, nor should she have, except for the fact that, she was being given me to chat with and make a connection with. And we're sort of making slightly uncomfortable small talk. And she said, so you're read your script, really liked it, and then she kind of petered out for a second. And then she said, hey, there's a werewolf in our new movie we're working on. And I said something to the effect of, like, oh yeah? Because I come out of the improv theater background, you always say yes and. I said, oh yeah? And she goes, yeah, it's a Scooby-Doo movie. And I said, oh yeah, okay, good. And I realized that to this person, it seemed anyway, basically a werewolf in a Scooby-Doo movie was kind of the same as this very serious, dark, kind of ahead of its time slightly take on the werewolf legend. And I was, comparing it to addiction and, that it was good as well as terrifying and, et cetera, et cetera. And I said, okay, the Scooby-Doo movie. Right. All righty. I don't even think that wasn't even one of the, the big screen Scooby-Doo movies with Sarah Michelle Gellar and all those folks. I think this was one of the animated feature-length films. So I said, okay, clearly I'm on a slightly different page than people down here. I don't know. Anyway, let me just check in and see who all is here. And I will say hello to a few folks, and then we will get to reading. So Jim, yo, how you doing? Kelly, good evening to you too. Cliff, good evening, buddy. Good to see you. Yeah, all's pretty well, all things considered. Considering that I don't have another birthday dinner coming for another year, it's sad because, of course, I love food, but no real question. Leah, what, boo? It says boo. Are you just scaring me, or are you shouting me down for saying something stupid? I can take it either way. I'm made of sturdy stuff. Anyway, Becca, good evening. No, I know you're just saying boo, like, I'm assuming you're saying boo, like, surprise. Becca, good evening. Good to see you. Happy spring. Yeah, we are just about, right? Tomorrow, I think, is the first day of spring, I believe. Anyway, so yes, happy spring. Kristen, hello. Good to see you. And Barban, hi. Ray, hello. Good to see you again. And Claudia, hello, Claudia. Greg, good evening. Good to see you too. You're very welcome. I enjoy doing these. Emily, hello. And present spring or fall to all. That's right, because we sometimes have, not so much in this time slot, but sometimes we have folks from the Antipodean end of things, and it is just becoming fall on their end. I've still never gotten over that. I've visited Australia, I've visited New Zealand, but I've never been there during like Christmas time. I was in Singapore during Christmas season, which was kind of strange, to be walking around in a steaming hot monsoon, rain and all that stuff and seeing the Christmas decorations. But I've never been in, say, for instance, a deserty, dry Australian Christmas time. So that'd be an interesting experience to have one day. So anyway, hello, Emily, and good to see you. Yes, and pleasant spring or fall, depending on which hemisphere you're in. Steve, hello, Steve, good to see you. Tim, greetings to you. And happy Sunday evening. Yes, and no, it is Sunday evening on my time, but the rest can put their own time slot in. Sally, just catching up on Gardener's World and was buzzed by yourself. Happy days. The Gardener's World, the television program, I'm assuming. I am not such a gardener, but my wife is a gardener, so I am a gardener enabler, I suppose. Who else we got? James D. Scott. Hello. Thank you for the happy birthday. Sally, what? I remember the interview you did with Steve Wright on Radio 2, surely the height of fame. I don't know. I was interviewed by Philip Schofield back when that really meant something. And he was actually a fan of my work. Lovely guy, Philip Schofield. And I think I was on Good Morning Australia once too. So I've had my fleeting moments of big time broadcast fame. Let's see. Good Morning Australia, for those of you who don't know, is like, a big national TV program in Oz. So who else? Who else? Annie. Hello, Annie. Long time no see. Good to see you. Patty. A pleasure. Alan, you were just checking in. Okay, Leah, thank you. Thank you for clearing that up. Alan, hello. It's Alan David Clark. James, I'd love to be back in Sydney. I love Sydney. I think it's one of the most beautiful cities in the world, especially the harbor, which is clearly, the most beautiful harbor I've ever seen. But I also really like both Sydney and Melbourne. I don't know Brisbane as well. I've only been there briefly, and the Gold Coast, I was indoors most of the time, so I can't comment on either of those places very much, although I had nice times in both places. But I have been out and prowled about in Sydney and Melbourne both and loved them. So, that there are times when my country elects a particularly odious individual to a high public office. I won't name any names, but just as an example, it's happened a couple of times in the last 20 years. Deb and I will often say either Australia, we'll say to each other, or New Zealand, we'll say to each other. So it's definitely a place that I have a great deal. Both of those countries are places that I have a great deal of fondness for in my heart. So yes, if I'm ever in Sydney, we will definitely hang out. And let me see. I got everybody. Okay, that's everybody who's checked in so far, and that is all good. So I guess I'm just going to go ahead and start reading. So, those of you who were not here last night will not know it, but we spent first a section reading where two members of the Grail Brotherhood, Robert Wells and Daniel Yakubian, discussed how Wells is going to send a hunter tracker program called Nemesis into the Otherland network without telling Jean Glure, who kind of is the owner and very secretive boss of the network, to try and track down this guy that got lost in the system, who we know is Paul Jonas, because we've been following his adventures. Then after that, we found Dredd on a plane to Cartagena, and where he is going to oversee some operation for Jean Glure, and it's apparently a fairly serious operation. And then we found out that he'd also kidnapped the stewardess from his flight, and the last thing we heard from that was him preparing to do something terrible to her in his Dread serial killer mode. So that's where we are, and now we're starting a new section. So that's what I'm going to do, is start reading there at the new section. Christabel was worried. It had taken her a long time to ride to the place Mr. Sellers had said. What if Mrs. Gullison went to her friend's house looking for her? What if her friend's parents were home? She would be in real trouble, and it would be even worse when Daddy found out. Thinking about how angry her father would be made her close her eyes. She accidentally rode down off the curb and almost fell when her bike thumped down onto the road and her front wheel went all wobbly. She pedaled hard until the bike was going straight again. She had promised Mr. Sellers that she'd help him, so she had to do it. The place he'd told her to go was along the outside edge of the base, another part she'd never seen before. It was way behind the athletic field. She could see men in white shorts and shirts doing some exercises on the grass. Music and a voice she couldn't understand because it was too far away were coming from speakers on poles by the field. The place Mr. Sellers had sent her had lots of trees and bushes on this side of the fence, and trees and bushes on the other side of the fence, but none in between. The empty space between the two fences looked like when she took her eraser and rubbed it across a drawing she'd done. Mr. Sellers had told her to pick a spot where there were some trees behind her, so no one would see what she was doing. After a little hunting, she found one. When she looked back, she couldn't see the field or any of the houses or other buildings, although she could still hear the music. She took her school bag out of her bike basket, took out the bolt cutters and put them on the ground, then took out the little scissor things and the roll of screen. She took the scissors and went to the fence, which was made of something almost like cloth, with little boxes along the top that made a quiet clicking noise. Beyond the outer fence, far away, smoke from campfires floated up into the air. Some people lived underneath the trees outside. She saw them when she and her parents drove off the base, and even more of them lived down in the valley near the freeway. They made their own homes, funny places built from old boxes and pieces of cloth, and her daddy said some of them even tried to sneak into the base by hiding in garbage trucks. She could see some of the box people through the fence, far away and tinier than the men on the exercise field, but the fence was funny to look through. Everything on the other side was a little cloudy, like when you could write your name on the inside of the car window. She touched the scissors to the fence cloth, then remembered that Mr. Sellers had said not to cut it yet. She went back to the bike basket and got out her storybook sunglasses. "Christabel," the message in them said, "if you are at the fence, turn your sunglasses off and on 2 times fast." She thought about this for a moment to make sure she was going to do it right, then pushed the button on the side of her glasses 4 times. Off, on, off, on. When the pictures had come back inside them again, there was a new message. "Count to 10 and then cut. When you are at the second fence, turn the sunglasses off and on 2 more times." Christabel had gotten to 6 when the music from the field suddenly went quiet and the boxes stopped clicking. She was frightened, but no one came or shouted at her, so she kneeled down and pushed the scissors into the fence. At first it was hard, but after the point suddenly went through, everything else was easy. She slid the scissors up as far above her head as she could reach, then picked up the big cutters and ran to the second fence. There was still no music, and the sound of her footsteps on the dirt sounded very loud. This fence, was made all of diamond shapes of thick wire covered in plastic. She turned her glasses off and on twice. "Cut the second fence 1 wire at a time, then come back. When your watch says 14:38, come back right away, no matter what. Don't forget the little screen." Christabel squinted. Prince Pick-a-Pick was already holding 14:28 between his paws, so she knew that wasn't very much time. She put the cutters on one of the pieces of fence wire and squeezed them with both hands. She squeezed and squeezed until her arms really hurt, and at last the biting part of the clippers snapped together. She looked at her watch, and the number said 14:31. There were still a lot of wires left to cut to make a hole as big as Mr. Sellers said to make. She began to cut the second wire, but it seemed even stronger than the first, and she couldn't make the big cutters bite through. She began to cry. "What the hell you do, Weenet? ¿Qué haces?" Christabel jumped and made a squeaking sound. Someone was watching her from a tree on the far side of the fence. "Nothing," she said. The person jumped down from the tree branch. It was a boy, his hair cut funny, his face dark and dirty. He looked like he was a few grades older than her. 2 more faces poked out of the leaves along the branch where he had been, a little boy and girl even dirtier than he was. They stared at Christabel like monkeys with their big eyes. "Don't look like nothing, Weenet," the older boy said. "Look like cutting that fence. Come?" It's a secret." She stared at him, uncertain of whether to run. He was on the far side of the fence, so he couldn't hurt her, could he? She looked at her Otter World watch. It read 14:33. "Mochita loca, you never cut that. Too small, you. Throw those here." He gestured at the bolt cutters. Christabel stared at him. He didn't have one of his front teeth, and he had funny pink patches on his brown arms. You can't steal them. Just throw them over. She looked at him, then grabbed the cutters by both handles. She swung them, then threw them as high as she could. They clattered against the fence and almost hit her as they fell back down. The boy laughed. You're too close, Weenet. Get back. She tried again. This time the cutters skittered over the top between the coils of sharp sticker wire and fell down on the other side. The boy picked them up and looked at them. I cut for you? I keep these? She thought for a moment, then nodded, not sure if Mr. Sellers would be mad or not. The boy bent to the next wire up from the one she'd already cut and squeezed the cutters. It was hard for him, too, and he said some words she'd never heard, but after a little while the wire snapped. He moved on to the next. Christabel's watch read 14:37 as he finished. I have to go home, she said. She turned and ran across the bare ground toward the first fence. Hold on, Weenet, he called after her. Thought you running away from the Mama-Papa Army base. What you do this for? She ducked through the hole in the first fence and was just about to jump on her bicycle before she remembered. She turned back and unrolled the little screen Mr. Sellers had given her. This kind of fence, he had said, the first fence, it talked to itself, and so it needed this little piece of screen so it could talk across the places she'd cut. She didn't know what that meant, but she knew it was very important. She spread the piece of screen until it covered all the part that was cut. It stuck where she pressed it. Hey, Weenhead, come back, the boy shouted. But Christabel was already throwing all of her things back in her school bag, and she didn't look back. As she jumped on her bike, the boxes on the fence started clicking again. A few seconds later, as she began to pedal toward home, she heard the music come back on again by the athletic field, strange and smeary in the distance. Chapter 27, Bride of the Morning Star. Netfeed News. Krellor declares bankruptcy again. Visual. Krellor on Tasmanian beach with Hagen. Voiceover. Colorful and controversial financier Uberto Krellor has declared bankruptcy for the second time in 10 years. Krellor, known as much for his famous stormy marriage to net star Villa Hagen and his months-long parties as his business interests, is reported to have lost Credit Suisse $3.5 billion in the crash of his Black Shield technology empire. Visual. Black Shield employees leaving Madagascar factory. Black Shield, which was an early and heavily bankrolled entrant into nanotechnology, suffered huge losses when the financial community lost faith in the new industry after a series of disappointing technical failures. Martine, please, we really need this. Rainey was trying to keep her voice calm, but not succeeding. Forget the equipment. We have to find somewhere to hide. We have nowhere to go. I've never seen no craziness like this, her father said from the back seat. Driving around and around. The blank screen remained maddeningly silent for long moments as Jeremiah turned the car onto the motorway and headed back toward Midtown Durban again. The pad was plugged into Dr. Van Bleek's Skyphone, and the transmission was being scrambled, but although the Frenchwoman seemed content with the security of the line, Renee was on edge. The shock of Del Rey's betrayal had left her jumpy and unsettled. I am doing the best I can do, Martine said at last. That is why I am being quiet. I have several lines going. I have been doing some other checking as well. There is no police bulletin mentioning you, at least. That doesn't surprise me. Renee struggled for calm. I mean, I'm sure it's a lot more subtle, whatever they're up to. We haven't done anything, so they'd find some other excuse. One of Dr. Van Bleek's neighbors will report people living in what's supposed to be an empty house. Then we'd be arrested for squatting or something. But it won't be anything we can fight. We'll just disappear into the system somewhere. Or it may be something more direct that does not use the law at all, Kabu added somberly. Do not forget what happened to your flat block. I wonder if Atasco and those Grail people had something to do with my suspension. Only the confusion of fleeing Susan's house had kept her from thinking of it earlier. The world outside the car seemed full of terrible but unforeseeable dangers, as though some poisonous gas were replacing the atmosphere. Am I becoming completely paranoid? Why would anyone go to so much trouble over people like us? I think this is becoming a lot of foolishness, said her father. We just move in, then we go running out the door again. With respect, Mr. Sulaweo, I think I must agree with Rini, Martine said. You are all in danger and should not go back to the doctor's house or anywhere else you are known. But I will keep trying to find some solution for these problems. I have a possibility that may solve both, but I am following a very faint trail that is 20 years old, and I am also trying not to make too much attention, if you understand. I will keep a line open for you. Call me if anything else happens. She clicked off. They drove on along the motorway for some minutes in tense silence. Jeremiah was the first to break it. That police car, I think it is following us. Rini craned her head. The cruiser, with its protruding light bar and bulging armor and crash bumpers, looked like some kind of predatory insect. Remember, Martine said there's no general alert out for us. Just drive normally. They're probably wondering what for cafe people doing in a big car like this, her father growled. Afrikaner bastards. The police car pulled out from behind them and into the next lane, then gradually accelerated until it was skimming along beside them. The officer turned to stare at them from behind mirrored goggles with the calm confidence of a larger and more powerful animal. She was black. Just keep driving, Jeremiah, Rini whispered. Don't look. The police car paced them for almost a mile, then pulled ahead and darted down an off-ramp. What is that black woman doing riding around in one of those? Shut up, Papa. They were parked in the outermost marches of a vast parking lot outside a warehouse mall in Westville when the call came. Long Joseph was sleeping in the back seat, his feet sticking out of the open car door, 6 inches of bare skin showing between pants cuff and socks. Rini was sitting on the hood with Kabu, drumming her fingers and smoking her dozenth cigarette of the young day, when the buzz sent her scrambling to the ground. She snatched the pad from the car seat and saw that it was displaying Martine's code. Yes, any news? Rini, you make me breathless. I hope so. Are you still in Durban? Close. Good. Could you please switch the frequency again? She pressed a button, and the doctor's skyphone cycled through to another channel. Martine was already there, waiting. Rini was again impressed by the mystery woman's expertise. I am dizzy and tired, Rini. I have examined so much information that I would be dreaming about it for days, I think. But I have found perhaps a thing that may help some of your problems. Really? You found some equipment? A place also, I hope. I have come across a South African government program, a military project, closed because of budget problems some years ago. It was called Wasp's Nest and was an early experiment in unpiloted fighting aircraft. There is no official record of it, but it existed. I have found certain, first-hand accounts of people who worked there, if that makes sense. No, it doesn't really, but I just need to know if the thing will do us any good. Is there some way we can get access to the actual machinery? I hope so. The closing was temporary, but it never reopened, so it is possible that some of the equipment still remains on the site. But the records are very, imprecise. You will have to investigate it for yourself. Rini could hardly bear the slight stirring of hope. I'll take the directions. Jeremiah's not back yet. He's just getting us some food. She fumbled open the panel on the back of the pad.
I'll just jack this thing into the car so you can download the map coordinates. No, Martine was surprisingly sharp. That cannot be. I will tell your friend Mr. Dacot how to get there, and he will follow my instructions. What if you are arrested while you are traveling, Rini? Then not only would there be that trouble, but the authorities would clear the car's memory as well, and this place, whatever hope it may bring, would be known to them.
Rini nodded.
Okay, okay, you're right.
She looked across the parking lot, hoping to see Jeremiah already returning.
Kabu leaned forward. May I ask a question? Certainly. Is there nowhere else we could go besides this place which may be surrounded by soldiers? Are there not many businesses that have VR connections, or who would sell or rent us the necessary equipment? Not for what we are speaking of,
Martine replied.
I am not sure even the best equipment at your polytechnic would have given you the level of response you need, and it certainly would not permit you to experience VR as long as may be necessary. Look, that's Jeremiah, Rini said suddenly, squinting at a distant figure. And he's running.
She set the pad on the car floor.
Come on!
She hurried around to the driver's side. As she sat staring at the dashboard, trying to remember her driving lessons from years before, Kabu forced his way into the back seat, waking a protesting and grouchy Long Joseph.
What are you doing?
Martine's voice was muffled by the pad cover, which had fallen closed.
We'll tell you in a minute. Stay connected.
Rini got the car started and seesawed out of the parking space, then headed toward Jeremiah. Forced to travel up and down rows of stationary cars, she had only moved them 100 feet closer when she pulled up alongside them. He clambered into the passenger seat, short of breath, and almost stepped on Rini's pad.
What happened?
They took the credit card. Jeremiah seemed stunned, as though this were the strangest thing that had happened so far.
They were going to arrest me. Good God, you didn't use one of Susan's cards, did you?
Asked Rini, horrified.
No, my card. Mine. They took it and waved it over the machine, then they told me the manager needed to speak to me. He didn't come for a moment, so I just ran out. My card. How do they know my name? I don't know. Maybe it was just a coincidence. This has all happened so fast.
Rini closed her eyes, trying to concentrate.
You'd better drive.
They exchanged places. Jeremiah headed as rapidly as he could toward the parking lot exit. As they joined a line of cars funneling out past the front of the mall, two uniformed guards emerged, talking into their headset microphones.
Don't look, said Rini. Just drive.
As they pulled out onto the main thoroughfare, Jeremiah suddenly sat up straight.
If they have my name, what if they go after my mother?
He seemed on the verge of tears.
That's not right. She's just an old woman. She hasn't done anything to anyone.
Rini put a calming hand on his shoulder.
Neither have we. But don't upset yourself. I don't think anyone would do anything to her. They can't know for sure you're even involved with us. I have to go get her.
He pulled into a turn lane.
Jeremiah, no!
Rini reached for an authority she did not feel.
Don't do it. If they are really looking for us that seriously, they'll be waiting for you to do just that. You won't do her any good at all, and we'll all be stuck.
She forced herself to think.
Look, Martine says she thinks she's found something. A place we can go. We need you to get us there. I'm sure you can make some arrangement for your mother. Arrangement?
Jeremiah was still wild-eyed.
Call one of your relatives. Tell them you've had to go out of town on... Tell them you've had to go out of town on some emergency. Ask them to keep an eye on her. If you stay away, whoever's after us won't have any reason to bother her.
She wasn't sure that was true, and she felt like a traitor for saying it, but she could think of nothing else.
Without Jeremiah and the mobility of the car, she and Kabu and her father stood no chance. But what if I want to see my mother? She's an old woman. She'd be lonely and frightened. What about Stephen? Long Joseph said suddenly from the back seat. If they chase us and we hide, we can't go see my boy when that quarantine's done. For God's sake, I can't think of everything right now, shouted Rini. Everyone, just shut up. Kabu's slender fingers reached over the seat and came to rest on her shoulder. You are thinking very well, he said. We must do what we are doing, what you have said. I am sorry to interrupt, Martine said from the pad beneath Rini's feet, making her jump. But do you wish me to give you some directions? Rini rolled down the window and took a deep breath. The air was warm and heavy with the threat of rain, but at the moment it smelled like escape. The Ilosi was speeding northwest along the N3, for the moment only another anonymous unit in the early thickening of the rush hour. Jeremiah had been able to reach an elderly relative and make arrangements for his mother's well-being, and Rini had dispatched business-like messages to Stephen's hospital and the poly that would cover for her with both institutions for a few days. They had sprung themselves free. They had sprung themselves free and seemed at least temporarily to have chucked their pursuers. The mood in the car was improving. Sorry, I'm just trying to fix something here. Okay, never mind. The mood in the car was improving. Martine had set them a destination high in the Drakensberg Range, along the Lesotho border, in an area too wild and with roads too primitive to be usefully explored in darkness. As the afternoon came on, Rini began to worry they would not be able to reach the area in time. She was not happy when Jeremiah decided to stop at a highway-side chain restaurant for lunch. Reminding the others that they made an odd-looking party, and that Kabu in particular was bound to be remembered, she convinced Jeremiah to go in and order 4 meals to take away. He came back, complaining about having to eat while driving, but they had only lost a quarter of an hour. Traffic became more sparse as they ascended from the plain and into the foothills. The road grew smaller, and the vehicles grew larger as little commuter runabouts were replaced by huge trucks, silver-skinned dinosaurs making their way to Ladysmith or beginning the long haul to Johannesburg. The silent Ilosi slipped in and out between the bigger vehicles, some of whose wheels were twice as high as the car itself. Rini could not help but feel it was an all too accurate analogy for their own situation, the vast difference in scale between themselves and the people they had offended. Except it would be even more like what's going on, she noted unhappily, if these trucks were trying to run over us. Luckily, the analogy remained loose. They reached the escort sprawl and turned west onto a smaller motorway, then left that after a short while for an even smaller road. As they climbed higher on the tightly winding mountain roads, the sun passed the noon midpoint and then seemed to spiral down the sky, heading for the mantle of black thunderheads that shrouded the distant peaks. Signs of civilization were dwindling, replaced by grassy hillsides and swaying aspens and, increasingly, dark strands. Let me start that sentence over. Signs of civilization were dwindling, replaced by grassy hillsides and swaying aspens and increasingly dark stands of evergreens. What good was try starting it over again? I still said it wrong. Dark stands of evergreens. Long stretches of these smaller roads seemed deserted, except for occasional signs promising that somewhere in the trees was hidden this lodge or that camp. It seemed that they were not only leaving Durban, but the very world as they had known it. The passengers had been silent for some time, caught up in the scenery when Kabu spoke. Do you see that? He pointed to a high, square section of the looming mountain. That is Giant's Castle. The picture, the cave painting in Dr. Van Bleek's house came from there. The small man's voice was strangely tight. Many thousands of my people were driven there, trapped between the white man and the black man. This was less than 200 years ago. They were hunted, shot on sight. A few of their enemies they killed with spears, but they could not win against guns. They were driven into caves and murdered. Men, women, children. That is why there are no more of my people in this part of the world.
No one could think of anything to say. Kabu fell into silence again. The sun was just beginning to pass behind one particularly sharp mountaintop, impaled like an orange on a squeezer, when Martine made contact again.
That must be Catkin Peak you are seeing, she said. You are nearly to the turning place. Tell me the names of the towns around you.
Jeremiah named the last few they had passed. Unhappy little aggregations of second-hand neon and industrial refit.
Good, Martine said. In perhaps a dozen kilometers, you will reach a town named Peter Kautsburg. Turn on the exit there, then take the first cross street to the right. How do you know all this? All the way from France, asked Jeremiah. Survey maps, I think they are called? She sounded amused. Once I discovered the location of this wasp's nest, it was not hard to find a route for you. Really, Mr. Dacko, you act as though I were a sorceress.
Oh, sorry, that was Jeremiah, not Long Joseph.
Within minutes, as she had predicted, a sign appeared proclaiming the imminence of Peter Kutzberg.
Jeremiah turned off, then turned again at the cross street.
Within moments, they were winding up a very narrow road. Catkin Peak, shrouded in dark clouds and silhouetted by the vanishing sun, loomed high on Reni's left. She remembered the Zulu name for the mountains, Barrier of Spears, but at this moment the Drakensbergs looked more like teeth, a vast, jagged, tusked jaw. She remembered Mr. Jay's and shivered. Perhaps Long Joseph had also been reminded of mouths. How are we going to eat out here? He asked suddenly. I mean, this is nowhere, big nowhere. We picked up plenty of food from the store at lunch, Rini reminded him. Couple of days' worth, maybe. But you said we're running away, girl. We're going to run away for 2 days? Then what? Rini bit back a snappish reply. For once, her father was right. They could certainly buy food in small towns like Peter Kutzberg, but there was a real risk that strangers would draw attention, and certainly strangers who kept coming back again and again would be remarked. And what would they use for money? If Jeremiah's account was frozen, she and her father could expect nothing but the same. They would go through the cash they had with them in days. You will not starve, Kabu said. He was talking to her father, but she sensed that he was speaking to her and Jeremiah as well. I have been little use so far, and that has made me unhappy. But there are no people better at finding food than my people. Long Joseph raised his eyebrows in horror. I remember you talking about the kinds of things you eat. You are crazy, little man. You think that I'm going to put any of that stuff in my mouth. Papa! Have you reached the next road yet? Martine asked. When you do, go past it and look for a track leading from the left side of the road, like a driveway to a house. The food controversy momentarily in abeyance, Jeremiah followed her instructions. A light mist had begun to dot the car windows. Rini heard thunder grumbling in the distance. The track looked narrow, but that was because it had become overgrown near the road. Once they were past the encroaching thorn bushes and had thoroughly scratched the Alosi's finish, almost bringing Jeremiah to tears again, they found themselves on a wide and surprisingly firm road that zigzagged steeply up into the mountains. Rini watched the deep woods roll by. Bottle brush plants, known as red-hot pokers, stood out against the grayness, bright as fireworks. This, this looks like a wilderness area, but there weren't any signs, not to mention fences. It is government property, Martine said, but perhaps they did not want to draw attention with signs and barriers. In any case, I have called Mr. Singh on the other line. He will be able to help us through any perimeter security. Sure. Singh's lined face appeared on the screen, glowering. I don't have anything better to do this week other than about 100 hours of cracking on this damned Otherland system. A bend in the road abruptly revealed a gated chain-link fence blocking their way. Jeremiah braked the car, cursing under his breath. What you got there? Singh asked. Hold up the pad so I can see. Making him sound Australian. It's just a fence, said Reenie, with a lock on it. Oh, I'll be a lot of help with that, he cackled. Yeah, just turn me loose. Reenie frowned and got out of the car, pulling up her collar against the light patter of rain. There wasn't a person in sight, and she could hear nothing but the wind in the trees. The fence sagged in places, and rust powdered the hinges of the gate, but it still made an effective barrier. A metal sign, all but scrubbed clean, still showed faint traces of the words, "Keep out." Whatever explanatory prose had accompanied the warning was long gone. It looks old, she said as she got back into the car. I don't see anyone around. Big secret government place, huh? Doesn't look like nothing to me. Long Joseph opened the door and began to shoulder his way out of the back seat. I'm going to have a piss. Maybe the fence is electrified, suggested Jeremiah hopefully. You go pee on it, then let us know, old man. Thunder cracked loud, closer now. Get back in the car, Papa, Reenie said. What for? Just get in. She turned to Jeremiah. Drive through it. Dako stared at her as though she had suggested he sprout wings. What are you talking about, woman? Just drive through it. Nobody's opened that thing in years. We can sit here all day while it gets dark, or we can get on with this. Drive through it. Oh, no, not in my car. It was scratched. Reenie reached over and pushed her foot down on top of Dako's, forcing the accelerator to the floor. The Elosi spat dirt from beneath the tires, caught traction, then leaped forward and slammed against the gate, which gave a little. What are you doing? Jeremiah shrieked. Do you want to wait until they track us down? Reenie shouted back. We don't have time for this. What good will a paint job do you in prison? He stared at her for a moment. The front bumper was still pushed against the gate, which had sagged back 1/2 meter, but still held. Dako swore and thumped his foot on the pedal. For a moment nothing changed except the noise of the engine, which rose to a shrill whine. Then something broke with an audible clank. The windshield spiderwebbed and the gate burst open before them. Jeremiah had to stomp on the brake to keep the car from rolling into a tree. Look at this, he screeched. He leaped out of the driver's seat and began a dance of rage in front of the car's hood. Look at my windscreen! Reenie got out, but walked instead to the gate, which she pushed shut. She found the chain where it had fallen, removed the wreckage of the padlock, and draped it back in place so it would still appear locked to a passing inspection. She looked around at the front of the car before getting back in. I'm sorry, she said. I'll find a way to make it up to you. Can we please just keep going now? It is getting dark, said Kabu. I think Jeannie is right, Mr. Dako. Damn, chortled Singh from the pad speaker. I hope you'll tell me what just happened. It just sounded pretty entertaining from here. The road beyond the gate was still unpaved and narrow. This doesn't look like much, said Long Joseph. Jeremiah, scowling and silent, drove forward. As they wound on through the evergreens, Reenie felt her adrenal surge draining away. What had Singh called her? Shaka Zulu? Perhaps he had been right. It was only a paint job, but what right did she have to push Jeremiah anyway? And for what? As of now, they seemed to be going nowhere. I smell something odd, Kabu began, but before he could complete his sentence, they had negotiated a bend, passing into the shadow of a mountain, and Jeremiah was treading hard on the brake. The road before them had disappeared. They skidded to a stop a few meters away from a featureless cement wall that stood like a vast door in the mountainside. Good God! Jeremiah stared, goggle-eyed. What is that? Tell me what you see, urged Martine. It's a gate of some kind, about 10 meters square, and it looks like a single slab of concrete. But I don't see any way to open it. Renee got out of the car and laid her hand against the cold gray stone. No handle, no nothing. A sudden thought filled her with gloom. What if it's not a gate at all? What if they closed this facility and just sealed it up? Look around. For God's sake, you always give up so easily. Singh's raspy voice made Renee stiffen. See if there's a box or a recessed panel or something. Remember, it doesn't have to be right there on the gate. The others climbed out of the car and joined Renee in her search. The twilight was thickening fast, and the rain made it even more difficult to see. Jeremiah backed the car away and turned on the lights, but they were not much help. I believe I have found something. Kabu was 10 paces to the left side of the gate. This is not true stone. Renee joined him. Holding her cigarette lighter's flame close to it, she could see hair-thin lines describing a square in the rock face. There was a small crevice in one seam that, although it appeared natural, might serve as a handle. Renee stuck her hand in and pulled with no result. Let me try, girl. Her father slid his large hand into the space and tugged. There was a heartening creak, but it still held fast. As if in answer, lightning flashed overhead, then thundered, and its echoes came caroming down the mountainside. The rain grew heavier. I will get the jack from the car boot, said Jeremiah. We might as well ruin that too. It took both Jeremiah and Long Joseph leaning on the jack, but the panel door finally popped open, long unused hinges grating. Inside was a small panel, crisscrossed with an array of tiny blank squares. It takes a code, Renee announced, loud enough for Martine and Singh to hear her. Do you have a hizzy cable? Singh asked. Hizzy? When Renee said she did, the old hacker nodded. Good. Pull the front of the panel off and hold the pad over here where I can see. I'll tell you how to hook me up. Then I'm going to get funky. Whatever Singh was doing did not pay immediate dividends. Once Renee had wired her pad into the control panel to his instructions, she propped it with a rock and returned to the car. The sun sank. A chill wind pushed the rain into a raking horizontal. Time seemed to pass very slowly, broken by only by an occasional and uncomfortably close blaze of lightning above them. Jeremiah, despite Renee's cautions about conserving battery power, turned on some music, featherweight but piercing pop fluff that did nothing to soothe her ragged nerves. Why'd they put this here? Her father asked, staring at the gray slab. It looks like it's supposed to be bomb-proof or something. She looked up at the steep pitch of the mountain face above it. And they've got it recessed a little, hidden from anyone flying overhead. Long Joseph shook his head. Who they trying to protect this place from? Renee shrugged. Martine says it was a government military base. I guess the answer is everyone. Kabu returned with an armful of wood, dripping wet but apparently unmindful of the downpour. If we do not get in, we will need a fire, he explained. Stuck into his pants pocket and looking somewhat incongruous beside his old-fashioned coat and antique necktie was a large sheath knife. If we don't get in, we're going to find us somewhere decent to sleep. Jeremiah was sitting on the hood of the car, arms crossed on his chest, looking thoroughly unhappy. There isn't room in this car, and I'm certainly not going to sleep in the rain. Besides, there are probably jackals up here, and who knows what else. Where are we going to go with no money? Rainey began, when a grinding noise, even louder than the thunder, made her start in alarm. The cement slab was sliding to one side, revealing a black emptiness inside the mountain. Singh's triumphant cry rang out above the noise of the gate's passage. Ichiban! Got it! Rini shut off the music and stared at the opening. Nothing stirred within. She walked forward through the streaming rain and leaned in to have a look, wary of booby traps or some other spy flick danger, but saw nothing except a concrete floor disappearing into the darkness. Actually, that was a bitch. The old hacker's voice crackled in the sudden silence. I had to work hard on that. Pretty much of a brute force job. One of the old government key codes, and they were always a bastard to crack. Cabo, Rini called. You said you're ready to make a fire. Well, why don't you make one? We're going inside and we'll need torches. Are you crazy, girl? Her father eased his way out of the back seat and stood. We got this car, and this car got headlights. What you want torches for? Rini felt a moment of irritation, but quelled it. Because it's easier for a person with a torch to see. So we leave the car in. That way, if they've pulled out the floor or something, we've got a better chance of noticing before we drive Jeremiah's expensive motor into a 50-foot pit. Her father looked at her for a moment, frowned, then nodded his head. Pretty smart, girl. And that's where we're going to hang it up for tonight. So, with no further ado, since we're a couple minutes past the top, I will say thank you so much for joining me. I will be back next Sunday, first at 1 a.m. and then at 7 p.m., I think. I don't think there's anything else going on that I know about now. So we will assume everything will go well and everything will be normal, and we'll be back reading next week. Because as I said, we're going to be reading at least until we finish this book. We still got a good third of the book to a quarter of the book left. And then I'll figure out what I'll do next, which will probably still entail me doing broadcasting of some kind. But I need to have a think about that first. But anyway, so with all of that, we're wrapping up for the night. Be good. Be good to yourselves. Be good to the other people around you. And I will see you very soon. And once again, thank you for joining me. Be good. Be well. Peace. I'm out.